On my birthday, my parents blindfolded me, said surprise, then dumped me at an abandoned barn. If you think the worst your family can do is forget your birthday, listen to this story. On my 26th birthday, they tied me up with sweet words and left me where nightmares begin. They told me to trust them, I did, and that very thing buried the old me forever. My name is Clara Hensley, and this is the story of how my family's cruelest joke became my greatest liberation. Growing up in Elmswood, birthdays were never celebrations in our house. They were stages for my parents' twisted sense of humor and my sister Morgan's special brand of cruelty. While other kids got piñatas and presents, I got pranks that left me crying in my room. The year I turned 10, they told all my classmates the party was canceled, then held it without me. At 13, they replaced my birthday cake with a cardboard replica filled with dirt. By 16, I'd learned not to expect anything but pain wrapped in ribbons. My mother Sandra would always say the same thing afterward, brushing my tears away with manicured fingers that felt like ice. "Oh, Clara, don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. You need to learn to laugh at yourself." My father Robert would nod from behind his newspaper, adding his trademark phrase, "Builds character, sweetheart. The world isn't kind to the weak." Morgan, 2 years older and infinitely more beloved, would smirk from her throne as the family's golden child. Everything came easy to her: grades, friends, our parents' affection. She collected their love like trophies while I scraped for crumbs of approval that never came. "Maybe if you weren't such a baby," she'd whisper when our parents weren't listening, "they'd actually like you." I left home at 18, the minute I graduated high school. No fanfare, no goodbye party, just me, a beat-up Honda Civic, and dreams of a life where birthdays might actually mean something good. I found work as a freelance graphic designer, building a client base slowly but steadily. My apartment was small, my furniture secondhand, but it was mine. No one there to fill my shampoo bottle with honey or short-sheet my bed as a hilarious wake-up surprise. For years, I kept my distance. Phone calls on major holidays, carefully orchestrated visits that never lasted more than a weekend. I learned to gray rock to become so boring, so unreactive, that they couldn't feed off my pain anymore. It worked, mostly. They found other sources of entertainment, other ways to amuse themselves that didn't require my participation. But trauma has a way of making you hope for things that will never come. Some part of me, buried deep beneath layers of self-protection, still wanted them to love me. Still believed that maybe, if I tried hard enough, if I was successful enough, if I was just different enough, they might see me as more than a punchline. That's why I agreed to come home for my 26th birthday. The calls started 3 weeks before. First from Mom. Her voice honeyed with a warmth I hadn't heard since, well, ever. "Clara, darling, we've been thinking. We know birthdays have been difficult in the past. We want to make it up to you. A real celebration this time." I should have hung up right then. Instead, I gripped my phone tighter, my heart doing that stupid little flutter of hope. "What do you mean?" "We've all been talking, your father, Morgan, and I. We realize we haven't been fair to you. Those pranks, we took them too far. We want to throw you a proper party, the kind you deserved all along." The smart part of my brain screamed warnings. But the little girl inside, the one who just wanted her family to love her, won out. I don't know. Mom. Please, sweetheart, let us do this for you. We've already started planning. Morgan even wants to help pick out decorations. She says she knows exactly what colors you love. Morgan wanting to help with anything involving me should have been red flag number 1. But Mom kept talking, painting pictures of a beautiful dinner, all my favorite foods, a custom cake from the fancy bakery downtown. "We even want to take you somewhere special first. A surprise, but a good one this time, I promise." The calls continued daily. Dad got on the line, asking about my work, seeming genuinely interested for the first time in years. Morgan texted photos of dress options, asking which one I thought would look best for my special day. They wanted to know my favorite flowers, whether I preferred chocolate or vanilla frosting. If I had any dietary restrictions they should know about. It felt like being love-bombed by my own family. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that leopards don't change their spots, that scorpions still sting even when they promise not to. But that hope, that terrible, vulnerable hope, kept whispering, what if they mean it this time? I drove back to Elmswood on a Thursday evening, my birthday falling on Saturday. The town looked exactly the same, white picket fences hiding untold suburban secrets. The water tower still painted with the high school mascot, Main Street's collection of shops that closed by 6. My parents' house sat on Maple Drive, a 2-story colonial that looked welcoming from the outside. I knew better. They greeted me at the door like I was returning royalty. Mom hugged me, actually hugged me, and Dad carried my overnight bag upstairs. Morgan appeared with a glass of wine and a smile that almost looked genuine. You look good, Clara. City life suits you. Dinner was surreal. They asked about my clients, my apartment, whether I was dating anyone. Normal family conversations that we'd never had before. No barbs, no cutting remarks disguised as jokes. Just pleasantness. It felt like wearing shoes that were just slightly the wrong size, almost right. But something was off. Friday passed in a blur of preparation. Mom took me shopping, insisting on buying me a new dress for the party. Red, she said, holding up a beautiful wrap dress. It's perfect for you. Morgan got our nails done together at the salon, chatting about her job at the marketing firm, her boyfriend, plans for a summer vacation. Dad grilled steaks for dinner, opening a bottle of expensive wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. I went to bed Friday night, allowing myself to believe. Maybe people could change. Maybe my family had finally realized how much they'd hurt me. Maybe this birthday would be different. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Found Mom in the kitchen making my favorite breakfast blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. Happy birthday, sweetheart, she said, placing a plate in front of me. 26 years old, I can hardly believe it. The morning passed lazily. Dad read the paper while I helped Mom prep vegetables for dinner. Morgan appeared around 11 with a small wrapped box. Pre-party present, she said, winking. Inside was a beautiful silk scarf, deep purple with gold threads. Thought it would go with your new dress. As afternoon approached, the energy in the house shifted. Excitement, anticipation. Mom kept checking her watch. Dad jingled his car keys. Morgan bounced on her toes like she had when we were kids, and she knew something I didn't. Okay, Mom announced at 3 o'clock. Time for your surprise. I thought dinner was the surprise, I said, suddenly wary. Oh no, that's later. First, we have something special planned. Morgan. My sister produced a red blindfold silk, like the scarf she'd given me. Don't worry, she said, seeing my expression. It's a good surprise. The best surprise. You're going to love it. Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. But they were all looking at me with such expectation, such apparent joy. And that little girl inside, the one who just wanted to belong, whispered, maybe this time. Okay, I heard myself say, okay. Morgan tied the blindfold gently, carefully. Her hands were steady, practiced. How many times had she done this before Dad took my elbow, guiding me toward the door? Watch your step, birthday girl. They led me to the car, helped me into the back seat. Morgan slid in beside me while my parents took the front. The engine started, and we began to move. So, Mom said brightly, are you excited? I'm curious. I managed. The blindfold smelled like Morgan's perfume, something expensive and floral. We've been planning this for weeks, Dad said. I could hear the smile in his voice. Ever since you agreed to come home, this is going to be perfect. They kept up a steady stream of chatter as we drove. Morgan talked about the decorations she'd picked, silver and gold, very elegant, while Mom described the menu for dinner. That mushroom risotto you loved at Christmas, I got the recipe from the restaurant. The drive felt longer than it should have for anywhere in Elmswood. I tried to track the turns, but Dad seemed to be taking a circuitous route. Left, right, straight for a while, another left. The roads got rougher, the smooth asphalt giving way to something more uneven. gravel, dirt. Almost there, Morgan sing-songed. Her hand found mine, squeezed. You're going to flip when you see this. The car slowed, turned one final time, and stopped. For a moment, nobody moved. The engine ticked as it cooled. A bird called somewhere in the distance. My heart hammered against my ribs. Okay, Mom said. We're here. Dad got out first, came around to open my door. The air smelled different here, earthier. With a hint of decay. October in the countryside. He helped me out, steady on the uneven ground. Can I take the blindfold off now? I asked. Just a few more steps, Morgan said. She'd gotten out on the other side, come around to link her arm through mine. We want you in exactly the right spot. They positioned me carefully, turning me slightly to the left. Mom's hands were on my shoulders, Dad's somewhere to my right. Morgan stepped back, and I heard her giggle that same sound from childhood when she'd put gum in my hair or hidden my homework. Okay, Mom said. On 3, 1, 2. I reached up to remove the blindfold myself, but they were already moving. Mom's hands left my shoulders. Footsteps on gravel. Rapid, retreating. Car doors slamming. 3, Morgan shouted, and the engine roared to life. I tore off the blindfold just in time to see our family SUV kicking up dust as it sped away. Morgan hung out the passenger window, waving. Happy birthday, Clara. Enjoy your party. Their laughter carried on the wind as the car disappeared around a bend, leaving me standing alone in front of a dilapidated barn in the middle of nowhere. The building loomed before me, a monument to abandonment. Once red paint had faded to the color of dried blood, peeling away in long strips that hung like dead skin. The roof sagged in the middle, and several boards were missing from the walls, creating gaps that stared like empty eye sockets. A broken weather vane creaked in the breeze, metal grinding against metal in a sound that raised goosebumps on my arms. I turned in a slow circle, trying to make sense of where I was. Fields stretched in every direction, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers gone to seed. A dirt road, the one they'd driven away on, curved into the distance. No houses, no landmarks I recognized. Just me, the barn, and the growing certainty that I'd been played for a fool once again. My hand went to my pocket for my phone. Empty. My wallet. Always in my back pocket, gone. They must have taken them while I was blindfolded. Probably Morgan with those steady, practiced hands. Your party, she'd said, and then they'd left. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of 26 years of humiliation settle on my shoulders like a familiar cloak. But something was different this time. The tears I expected didn't come. The hysterical panic that should have set in remained dormant. Instead, a strange calm descended, cold and clear as winter air. I looked down at myself, the red dress Mom had insisted on buying, the purple scarf from Morgan, the careful staging, the weeks of phone calls, the love bombing designed to lower my defenses. They'd planned this meticulously, probably laughing together each night about how perfectly it was working, how gullible, stupid Clara was falling for it all over again. The sun was already past its peak, maybe 4 o'clock. October meant early darkness, and the temperature would drop fast once the sun set. I was miles from town. I could tell that much from the drive, wearing a dress and heels completely unsuitable for walking any distance. They'd thought of everything. I walked to the barn, testing the door. Locked, of course, with a rusty padlock that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Through the gaps in the walls, I could see empty space littered with old hay and debris. No help there. The road stretched in 2 directions. The way they'd gone presumably led back toward town. But how far 5 miles 10? And did I even want to go back to Elmswood, where everyone would soon know about the Hensleys' latest hilarious prank on their disappointing daughter? I chose the opposite direction. The heels lasted about 100 yards before I took them off, carrying them in one hand. The dirt was cold beneath my feet, scattered with small stones that bit into my soles. But I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, letting the rhythm create a meditation of sorts. With each step, I shed something. The hope that they would ever love me, gone with the first mile. The belief that I somehow deserved their treatment scattered like the dandelion seeds that floated past on the breeze. The desperate need for their approval ground into the dirt with every footfall. By the time I saw the farmhouse in the distance, I was a different person than the one who'd put on that blindfold. The house was small, well-maintained, with smoke rising from the chimney. A pickup truck sat in the driveway. Normal, everyday life happening while mine imploded a few miles away. I approached carefully, aware of how I must look designer dress dusty and wrinkled, barefoot, carrying expensive heels, hair wild from the wind. A dog barked as I climbed the porch steps. The door opened before I could knock, revealing a man in his 60s wearing overalls and a John Deere cap. His eyes widened as he took me in. "Miss you all right?" "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I've had some car trouble. Could I possibly use your phone?" He studied me for a moment, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. Strange woman, clearly not from around here, showing up with no vehicle in sight. But something in my face must have convinced him, because he stepped aside. "Come on in. You look like you could use some water." The inside was exactly what you'd expect from a farmer's house. Worn furniture, family photos on every surface, the smell of coffee and something savory cooking on the stove. A woman appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, and stopped short at the sight of me. "Hank," she said, question in her voice. "Lady needs to use the phone. Mabel, had some car trouble." Mabel's eyes were sharper than her husband's. She took in my appearance, the designer dress, the lack of purse or phone, the careful way I held myself. "Honey," she said slowly, "did someone hurt you?" The kindness in her voice almost undid me. "No," I said. Not physically. I just need to call a cab, if that's possible. I'll pay the driver when I get home." They exchanged glances. "Nearest cab company's in Millbrook," Hank said. "That's 30 miles east, but my nephew runs a car service. He could probably come get you." While Hank made the call, Mabel sat me at their kitchen table and put a glass of water in front of me. She didn't push, didn't ask questions, just puttered around making coffee and cutting slices from a freshly baked apple pie. "You're not from around here," she said eventually, setting a plate in front of me. "Elmswood," I admitted, "but I've been living in the city for a few years. Visiting family." I looked at the pie, golden crust glistening with cinnamon sugar. "Something like that." She made a sound that suggested she understood more than I'd said. "Well, you're safe here. Eat up. Hank's nephew won't be here for at least an hour." The pie was perfect tart apples, flaky crust, a hint of nutmeg. I ate mechanically at first, then with growing appreciation. When was the last time someone had shown me this kind of simple kindness without wanting something in return? "Thank you," I said when I finished. I don't know how to repay you." Mabel waved a hand. "Don't be silly. Though if you wanted to tell me who left you out by the old Morrison barn, I wouldn't be opposed to giving them a piece of my mind. You know it. Been abandoned for 20 years. Morrison family moved to Florida, left the place to rot. Kids sometimes go out there to drink, make trouble." She paused. "But you don't look like you were making trouble." I laughed, surprising myself. "No, I was the trouble that needed to be gotten rid of." Her face hardened. "Family!" I nodded. "Well," she said, refilling my water glass with more force than necessary, "then they're fools as well as cruel." Hank's nephew arrived as promised, a cheerful guy named Dale who didn't bat an eye at driving a barefoot woman in a party dress back to the city. I tried to give him Mabel's pie dish to return, but she insisted I keep it. "You bring it back sometime," she said firmly. "When you're visiting because you want to, not because someone made you." The drive back to my apartment took 2 hours. Dale kept up a steady stream of chatter about sports, weather, his girlfriend's obsession with reality TV. Normal, mundane topics that felt like a lifeline to sanity. I directed him to an ATM near my building, paid him double his usual rate despite his protests. My spare key was still hidden under the fake rock by the doorstep. Inside, My apartment waited exactly as I'd left it my real life, untouched by my family's poison. I dropped the heels by the door, set Mabel's pie dish carefully on the counter, and went straight to my laptop. They'd already posted on Instagram. The photos showed the three of them around a dining table laden with food. The fancy bakery cake I'd been promised sat in the center, but instead of "Happy Birthday, Clara," it read, "Finally free," in elegant script. Mom had her arm around Morgan, both of them laughing. Dad raised a champagne flute toward the camera. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings." Sometimes you have to take out the trash to make room for treasure. Family. First. New. Chapter. Bye-bye, baggage. The comments were already piling up. Friends and relatives who didn't know the real story offering congratulations, heart emojis, observations about how happy they all looked. A few people asked where I was. Morgan had replied to those, "Oh, Clara couldn't make it. She had other plans." I stared at the screen until the images blurred, but still, no tears came. Instead, that strange calm deepened, hardened into something with edges sharp enough to cut. They thought this was the end of the story. They thought they'd finally gotten the ultimate joke, the perfect prank to cap off 26 years of cruelty. Dump stupid, sensitive Clara in the middle of nowhere and celebrate her absence. They had no idea what they'd actually done. I closed Instagram and opened a different folder on my desktop. Documents I'd never had the courage to look at before, too painful to consider. Grandma Hensley's will. The cabin on Lake Serene that she'd left to me and only me, much to my parents' fury. They'd pressured me for years to sign it over for the family. But I'd held on to it out of sheer stubbornness more than any plan to use it. Now, I had a plan. I spent the rest of the night researching. Property lawyers, contractors, business licenses. By dawn, I had a vision clear as the sunrise breaking through my window. They wanted me gone. They'd get their wish. But I wasn't disappearing quietly into the shame they'd prepared for me. I was going to transform. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. I threw myself into work, taking on extra clients, saving every penny I could. I met with lawyers, toured the cabin with contractors, drew up business plans. The old Clara might have second-guessed every decision, worried about what people would think. The new Clara moved with purpose, each step calculated for maximum impact. The cabin had been neglected, but not destroyed. Grandma's bones were good solid log construction, a stone fireplace that just needed cleaning, a view of the lake that took your breath away. The contractors I hired were local to Lake Serene, eager for the work and intrigued by my vision. A retreat. Jim, the lead contractor, asked as we walked through the space. Like a hotel. Like a sanctuary, I corrected, for women who need to remember who they are. I didn't tell him about the barn, about the birthday, surprise, about years of being the family punching bag. But I think he sensed something in my determination, the way I insisted on certain details. Windows that let in maximum light, multiple exits from every room, a security system that was subtle but comprehensive. While construction progressed, I quietly severed ties with my old life. I blocked my family's numbers, unfriended them on social media, had my mail forwarded to a P.O. box. Let them wonder why I hadn't come crawling back, begging for forgiveness for ruining their joke by not playing along. The hardest part was finding my tribe. I started with online support groups for family scapegoats, adult children of narcissistic parents, survivors of emotional abuse. I shared my story in pieces, finding echoes in dozens of other voices. Women who'd been told they were too sensitive, too difficult, too much. Women who'd been abandoned in their own ways, left to find their own light in the darkness. I'm creating something. I posted one night, a place for us, a place where birthdays are celebrated, not weaponized, where sensitivity is a strength, not a weakness, where we can heal without judgment. The responses poured in, women offering skills, expertise, encouragement. A therapist in recovery from her own toxic family volunteered to run workshops. An artist who'd been disowned for refusing an arranged marriage offered to teach classes. A chef whose mother had told her she'd never amount to anything wanted to create healing meals that nourished body and soul. By spring, the transformation was complete. What had been a neglected cabin was now the Lantern Haven, a name I chose for its connection to light in darkness. But also as a private joke. They'd left me at a barn. I'd built something that offered what barns once did: shelter, warmth, community. But I wasn't done yet. The grand opening was scheduled for May 15th. I sent press releases to every media outlet within 100 miles, emphasizing the unique mission of the retreat. First rural sanctuary for family scapegoat survivors opens at Lake Serene. The story of a young woman transforming her grandmother's cabin into a healing space caught fire. Regional newspapers wanted interviews. A popular blog about toxic families asked to feature our story. I gave every interview, I posed for every photo, and in each one, I made sure to mention the inspiration. The idea came to me on my birthday. I told the reporter from the Millbrook Gazette, I was at a real crossroads, standing in front of this old, abandoned barn in the middle of nowhere. And I realized I could either let the darkness swallow me, or I could become a light for others. That barn, it changed everything. I knew word would get back to Elmswood. Small towns thrive on gossip. And the Hensleys being connected to anything newsworthy would be too juicy to resist. I wondered how long it would take. 3 days after the article ran, my P.O. box had its first piece of family mail. I recognized Mom's handwriting on the envelope, the careful script that had signed 1,000 permission slips and absence notes. Inside, a single sheet of her monogrammed stationery. Clara, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this needs to stop. That article was completely inappropriate. How dare you air family business to strangers? We demand you cease this nonsense immediately. Contact us at once. Mother. I filed it carefully in a folder labeled Evidence and went back to preparing welcome packets for our first guests. The emails started next. Dad's terse demands from his work account, Morgan's lengthy screeds about how I was embarrassing the family, ruining their reputation, being dramatic as always. I didn't respond to any of them, but I kept every single one. Documentation, my lawyer had advised, just in case. The week before opening, I had one last detail to arrange. I commissioned a local artist to create gift bags for the opening ceremony attendees. Canvas totes, screen printed with a simple design, a lantern casting light on a barn in the distance. Below it, in elegant script, your pain is not their joke. Opening day dawned bright and clear. The retreat was booked solid for the first month. Women coming from 3 states away. The press showed up as promised, cameras capturing the ribbon cutting, the tour of facilities, the workshop spaces where healing would happen. This place, I told the assembled crowd, exists because sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who wound us deepest. But those wounds don't have to define us. We can choose to transform our pain into purpose, our darkness into light. I was mid-sentence when I saw them. The silver SUV pulled up to the edge of the parking area. Dust swirling around its wheels like an omen. My voice never faltered as I continued my speech. But I tracked their movement in my peripheral vision, all 3 of them, dressed like they were attending a formal event. Mom in her best St. John suit, Dad in his golf club blazer, Morgan in something designer and desperately inappropriate for a rural retreat. They waited until the ceremony ended, until the cameras were packing up and guests were mingling with cups of lavender lemonade. Then they approached, moving in formation like they'd rehearsed it. I stood on the porch of what had been Grandma's cabin, watching them come. No blindfold this time, eyes wide open. Clara? Mom's voice carried that tone I knew so well, disappointment wrapped in false concern. We need to talk. Welcome to the Lantern Haven, I said pleasantly. Are you here for a tour? We're booking into July, but I might be able to fit you in for a day workshop on setting boundaries. Dad's face flushed. Cut the act. You know why we're here. I'm afraid I don't. But if you're here to celebrate our opening, Gift bags are on the table by the door. I think you'll find the message particularly meaningful. Morgan snatched one of the bags, pulling out the tote. Her face went white, then red. You absolute language, I interrupted calmly. This is a healing space. We maintain certain standards. Standards. Mom's voice rose. You want to talk about standards. What about family loyalty? What about keeping private matters private? What about abandoning your daughter in the middle of nowhere on her birthday? I asked, still pleasant, still calm. A few lingering guests glanced our way, interested. What about 26 years of pranks designed to humiliate? What about raising a child to be your personal entertainment? You're being dramatic, Morgan snapped. It was a joke. You've blown this completely out of proportion, as usual. Have I gestured to the retreat around us. Because from where I'm standing, your joke gave me the clarity I needed. You wanted me gone. Congratulations, I'm gone. You wanted to be free of me. You're free. But you don't get to control how I choose to transform that abandonment into something meaningful. Dad stepped forward, using his intimidation stance, chest out, shoulders back, the posture that had cowed me as a child. You will shut this down. You will stop talking to reporters. You will. I will do none of those things. I met his eyes steadily. And if you continue to harass me or my guests, I'll be happy to share with those reporters exactly why this place exists. Every birthday surprise, every cruel joke, every single thing you did that led to me standing in front of that barn, realizing that the only way to survive you was to stop needing you. You can't threaten us, Mom hissed. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply existing, fully and authentically, for the first time in my life. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. A security guard approached. I'd hired 2 for the opening, just in case. Everything all right, Ms. Hensley? Perfect. Tom, these folks were just leaving. They have a long drive back to Elmswood. Morgan looked ready to explode. This isn't over. You can't just... Actually, I can... I turned to go inside, then paused. Oh, and happy birthday to me. By the way, 7 months late, but I'm finally having the celebration I deserve. I walked inside, closing the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched Tom escort them to their car, professional but immovable. They sat there for a few minutes, probably debating their next move. Then the engine started, and they drove away, dust swirling in their wake like the ghosts of every cruel word they'd ever spoken. Inside, women were gathering for the first workshop, Reclaiming Your Narrative. I stood at the back, listening as our facilitator began with her own story of family rejection and resurrection. Around the room, heads nodded, tears fell, hands reached out to comfort, community, understanding. Everything a family should provide but mine never had. That night, after the guests had settled into their rooms and the retreat fell quiet, I walked down to the lake. The water reflected the stars, pinpricks of light in the darkness. I thought about that barn, about the moment I'd stood there abandoned and alone, convinced it was the worst thing that could happen to me. But it wasn't the worst thing, it was the beginning. They'd meant to break me with their ultimate prank, to finally prove once and for all that I was worthless, unwanted, a burden to be discarded. Instead, they'd set me free. Free from hoping they'd change. Free from believing I deserved their cruelty. Free to build something beautiful from the ashes of their rejection. The retreat grew beyond my wildest dreams. Word spread through whisper networks and online communities. Women came seeking sanctuary and left with tools to rebuild their lives. We expanded, adding cabins, hiring staff, creating scholarship programs for those who couldn't afford the full retreat price. Every success was documented in local media. Every workshop, every healing story, every life transformed, and always, I mentioned the barn, my origin story, the darkness that sparked the light. My family tried other tactics. Legal threats that my lawyer laughed off. Attempts to turn extended family against me with tales of my instability and attention-seeking. A particularly nasty smear campaign on social media that backfired when our supporters rallied to share their own stories of family abuse. Through it all, I held steady. No contact, no engagement, just the continued work of building something meaningful from the wreckage they'd created. 2 years after the opening, on my 28th birthday, I received a final letter, not from my parents or Morgan, but from my Aunt Dad's sister who'd always been kind but distant, afraid to rock the boat. "Dear Clara," she wrote, "I heard about what happened on your 26th birthday. I'm ashamed it took me this long to reach out. I knew how they treated you. We all did, and we said nothing, did nothing, because it was easier to look away. I'm sorry. What you've built is beautiful. Your grandmother would be so proud. Happy birthday, dear one. May this year bring you all the joy you deserve." I framed that letter, hung it in my office at the retreat, a reminder that sometimes, eventually, the truth finds its voice. The barn still stands, I'm told, even more dilapidated, even more forgotten. Sometimes new guests arrive with stories of their own abandonment, literal or metaphorical, and I tell them about standing in front of that crumbling structure, barefoot and betrayed, and choosing to walk away towards something better. But how, they ask, how did you find the strength? And I tell them the truth. I didn't find it, I built it, one step, one day, one choice at a time. The same way you will. The tote bags from our opening became collector's items among our community. Your pain is not their joke became a rallying cry, a reminder, a promise. Women had it tattooed on their arms, painted on their walls, written in journals where they documented their own resurrections. As for my family, they eventually gave up their attempts to force me back into their narrative. The last I heard through the Elmswood grapevine, they tell people I had a breakdown, that I'm living in some sort of cult compound, that they tried to help, but I was beyond saving. Let them tell whatever story helps them sleep at night. I have my own story now, and it's so much better than anything they could imagine. 5 years after the barn, I stood again on the porch of what was once Grandma's cabin. The Lantern Haven had become a beacon for wounded souls, a testament to the power of transforming pain into purpose. Lanterns hung from every eave, their warm light pushing back the darkness. Inside, women laughed over dinner, sharing stories of triumph over family trauma. Tomorrow, new guests would arrive, scared and skeptical, wondering if healing was really possible. I'd be there to greet them, to tell them yes, it's possible. Yes, you can survive the unsurvivable. Yes, you can build something beautiful from the ugliest betrayal. Because sometimes the people who try hardest to break you are actually setting you free. Sometimes the cruelest joke becomes the greatest gift. Sometimes you have to be abandoned at a barn to find your way home. And sometimes, just sometimes, the light you become is bright enough to show others the way out of their own darkness. That's my story. The story of how my family's final prank became my first day of freedom. The story of how a barn in the middle of nowhere led to a haven by the lake. The story of how the worst birthday of my life became the beginning of everything good that followed. They thought they were writing my ending. Instead, they gave me the perfect beginning. And every year on my birthday, I stand by the lake and whisper a thank you to the wind. Thank you for showing me who you really were. Thank you for pushing me so far I had no choice but to fly. Thank you for the barn, the blindfold, the cruelty that carved space for kindness to grow. I am Clara Hensley. I was abandoned, but not destroyed. I was discarded, but not worthless. I was left in darkness, but I became the light. And that's the best birthday gift I ever gave myself.